So I want to welcome everyone officially to the latest installment in our webinar series, our Leadership Coach Group Open Coaching series. This installment for April is called How Do I Develop a Bolder Executive Presence Yet Still Be Me? And kudos to Marie-Jeanne, our presenter. Not only is she presenting, but she came up with this title. And I think it's a really nice balance of folks that say, "Hey, I want to have that executive presence. I want to be heard in the boardroom, in the conference room. I want my ideas to be considered by my peers, and yet I still want to be who I am." And so that's a tension sometimes we heard, and Marie-Jeanne captured that really well in our title. I also want to introduce Carl from our team and Maya. I want to thank both of you for all you've done to help uh, to bring this to fruition and to get people here to share in what we have to present to them. And in a few minutes, I'll be introducing Marie-Jeanne and talking more about this series. But for those of you that just joined us, I want to invite you to put in the chat where you're calling in from so we can greet you by name and where you're from. We'd love to hear that. We have a really good number of people joining us, so it's really great to hear this wonderful content that Marie-Jeanne will be sharing with you. So we have Stephanie from Massachusetts. Welcome, Stephanie. Really glad to have you here. I spent a few years in Massachusetts for graduate school, so a great state up there in Massachusetts. We have Sarah from Florida. Welcome, Sarah. So glad to have you. And Sarah, thank you so much for participating. I know you participated in our other webinars as well. I'm glad to welcome you back for this one. And we have Tanya from Ontario, Canada. I think very highly of our neighbors to the north, so a very hearty welcome to those from Tanya from Canada. We have Elva from South Texas. Welcome, Elva. And we have Melky from San Francisco, Sylvia from Washington, D.C. Sylvia is also part of our leadership development team, one of our coaches and one of our speakers. Welcome, Sylvia. Marvin from Columbia, South Carolina. So glad to have you with us, Marvin. My name is Michael Seelman. I am the CEO of a leadership coach group, and I'm in the Washington, D.C. area, along with Sylvia and Sarah, who also from our team in the Washington, D.C. area. So again, this presentation is our webinar on how do I develop a bolder executive presence, yet still be me. So we'll be talking about that, might feel like a tension, and how to resolve that so that you can accomplish the goals, to be heard, to be persuasive, to have the impact you want in your leadership. And now, next, what I'd like to do is to talk with you a little bit about this series of webinars that we have. This is called our LCG Open Coaching Series. So you might say, well, why do we call it open coaching? Well, open coaching is because we do coaching here after we introduce some material, and we'll ask you to be a volunteer. So Marie-Jeanne will be asking for someone that has a situation where they might want to talk about how they could be more persuasive in a particular situation. And we do that each month. We introduce some content by a really knowledgeable expert on our team, and then we invite volunteers to actually be coached by that knowledgeable expert. And we do it the first Friday of the month at noon Eastern Standard Time. And so if you like this webinar, we invite you to participate in other webinars, and we welcome back the people that participated in the ones before. Each of our webinars is designed to provide you actionable insights. We don't just tease you, we actually try to give you things that you can run with, both what you hear in the webinar and what you'll get in our playbook. And in our playbook is a step-by-step guide that you can use in the comfort of your own home or in your office or under a tree, wherever you'd like. That playbook will help you go deeper into what our presenters share. And as I mentioned, we'll invite you to volunteer. So this particular playbook that you all have access to is going to have three core sections to it. The first section, and this will dovetail nicely with what Marie-Jeanne's going to present to you today. The first section is to demystify executive presence. You might have heard that term, but what do we really mean by that? You're going to hear more about that today and in depth in the playbook. You'll also hear about how do I have that bolder executive presence, yet still stay true to myself. That's the second core section. And the third core section is how to overcome feelings of self-doubt. In our playbook are also practical tools and techniques. There'll be engaging reflection questions. There'll be hands-on activities about how to apply these strategies. And so we encourage you to listen and engage with the material Marie-Jeanne presents, but also to use this playbook to take it even further. And of course, we are available if you want to go even further than that. We are here to support you as an individual. We're here to support your organization. And how we can do that is we provide one-on-one coaching as a leadership coach group. We have services around team effectiveness that include um, team coaching, that include leadership training, that include inspirational speakers like Sylvia that's joined us as a participant. And we also have leadership assessments to say, hey, how am I doing right now as a leader? What changes might I make in the future? And that's something we talk about in the playbook also is a coach can help you assess where you are right now with executive presence and also assess on any movement you might have as you work on your executive presence. So we encourage you to reach out to us. Maya or I would be happy to meet with you. If you want us to, please put in the chat and Maya will be taking a look at that to see if you'd like us to set up a meeting. We'd be happy to reach out to you and set up a meeting and talk with you about these services that we can do for you or for your organization. And our coaches, our trainers, our speakers, they've worked with leaders at some global brands that you probably heard of, such as Oracle or Facebook or Salesforce or FICO, Sony, Microsoft, Google, you name it. We've worked with leaders there. Now you might be saying, I don't work at one of these global brands. Can you help me in my company? Absolutely. We've worked with people from companies of just one person, where the owner, up to people that are leading thousands of people. So whatever the size of your organization, whatever industry, wherever you are in the world, whether you're in private sector, nonprofit, or government, we can help you. We've worked with leaders like you, and we'd be honored to work with you as well. So often when I participate on webinars, I'm like, am I going to get a copy of that slide deck? And how do I follow up and all these great things that I hear about? Well, we're going to send a follow-up email to you. It should come to you just a few minutes after we wrap up for the day. And in that email, you'll get a link to a page where you'll be able to download that executive presence playbook that I mentioned. You'll get a copy of the slide deck that Marie-Jeanne will be presenting today. And bing, 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 extra attention. You'll be a chance to have a complimentary coaching session with Marie-Jeanne. There'll be a link there of how to schedule that. And I encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity. I'm sitting better up because I know I've seen the slides. I know part of it's having a good executive presence, having good posture. So I don't want to slouch too much as I'm talking about introducing our speaker today. And so that speaker is Marie-Jeanne, and she is a coach of C-suite executives. She's worked with founders, rising leaders as they transition to larger roles and require up-leveled executive presence and communication skills, which is what we're talking about today. She prepares leaders for high-stakes presentations and keynotes. So not only can she generally coach them, she's can zero in on specific high-impact meetings that people are having and help them be successful in that. She brings her own experience at having been an executive at a Fortune 500 company. She's also been a leader at a Silicon Valley startup. So she's walked the talk that you're going to hear from her today and helped leaders later in their own positions and how they've been successful. She's coached people through Stanford's Graduate School of Business. She's a former national business journalist, including working with the New York Times. And in her approach, she blends both neuroscience and practical strategies for impactful, authentic leadership. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to my colleague and fellow founding member of the Leadership Coach Group, Marie-Jeanne Juilland. Marie-Jeanne.
Thank you so much, Michael, for the introduction and for the opportunity to speak with all of you today to share about executive presence. Before we dive in, I'd like to invite you. We're going to do a short exercise. One of the goals would be to get us present right now, because I know that we've probably all had very hectic days already today. And secondly, this exercise is something that you could use at any time as a leader if you're about to go on stage, or if you're going into some kind of a high stakes presentation, or any meeting or communication. So we're going to do 3 simple steps in this exercise. The first one is I'm going to ask you to turn off your phones and any notifications. So I'll just wait for a minute here so everybody can do that. All right. And now I'll invite you to close your eyes, or if you're more comfortable, just keep them open, looking downward. And I'm going to guide you through 2 breath cycles. And we're going to do a series. I'm going to count to 4. You're going to hold for 2, and then you're going to let the breath out as slowly as you can. And as you do, just release any tension you're feeling anywhere. All right. So we're going to begin now. And breathing in deeply, 2, 3, 4, hold 2, and now very slowly, 2, 3, 4, and letting those shoulders drop, letting anything else, tension drop, and taking in now one more breath like that again, nice and deep. 2, 3, 4, holding it for 2, and letting it out again, letting go, and letting go. Great. All right. Well, I hope that has helped you all feel more present and less stressed. I know it always helps me. Executive presence. It seems like everyone is supposed to have it, and you're supposed to know what it is. Why? Well, actually, it is instrumental for your career, and it's instrumental for your ability as a leader to lead your team successfully and your entire organization. Next, in fact, research shows that your executive presence skills are going to make up about 26% of what it's going to take you as a leader to get to the next level. And that does not discriminate based on what role you're in. For example, I have coached leaders who are independent contributors, right? And they need to work on these skills because they're going to be presenting to some other team, could be on an executive level, could be at any level. I've coached leaders who maybe have already teamed mid-size or very large divisions. Now they're being asked by their organization to move into a role with even a larger scope. And the organization is looking at them to see, do you have these skills already? And do you have the capacity, right, and the interest and the commitment to growing those skills? Because they're going to be essential if you're going to operate at a larger scale. And interestingly enough, I think people often think, oh, CEOs and people in the C-suite, well, they've already got it, the executive presence. They've got it all buttoned up. That's why they're up there. Well, I have quite a few leaders at that level who are working all the time on improving their executive presence skills. They need to present on many very high stakes meetings, conversations, whether it's to their board, whether it's to stakeholders, to shareholders, to, as importantly, their employees. Today, we are going to cover executive presence, but we're not going to cover everything because it's a very broad topic and it's a very deep topic. What I will cover today is, as Michael referenced earlier, I'm going to demystify executive presence for you, help you understand what it really is about. Secondly, we're going to talk about how you can stay true to yourself in that process as you're adopting new behaviors, new ways of leading. And thirdly, we're going to talk about how to handle self-doubt if that arises for you. And then finally, we're going to do this open live coaching. And it's going to be, I'm going to invite you to bring something, a scenario that you want to work on. I'll coach you on it, and you're going to be leaving with a really specific new takeaway and skill. So please, as we're going through the webinar, think about volunteering. So what is executive presence? In my years as a leader, I found it to be, it was this nebulous word, and I'd argue it's still a nebulous word. Now I've been a coach and advisor for quite a few years, and I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of leaders, and in that process, not only learn through observing, but also studying that topic. Here's what I've learned. At its core, executive presence is your ability to demonstrate your power. Yes, I use the word power, and I know that some people recoil from the word power. But let's think about it. Power is in relationships everywhere. The dynamic between two people or teams of people is often a power dynamic. If whether you're at home with your partner, whether it's with a friend, maybe you're even in a store, there's a dynamic there. And of course, in your work world, right? So it is essentially your ability to influence. And what I'd like to invite you to do is to embrace this power, your power, not for your ego, not for the ability or to dominate, but so that you can inspire your teams and those around you to take the actions that you feel are most positive. Let's dive a little deeper to understanding demystifying executive presence. I view it as being on a continuum. There are two ends of that continuum. One of them is what I refer to as charisma. I'm sure you've all heard that word, right? And on the other end, we have the other word that we hear all the time is gravitas. So someone who has a leadership style that is more oriented towards charisma is able to make people feel very comfortable around them, actually maybe like them, engage easily with them. This is a leader who listens well, and they tend to kind of invite respect. The other word that I use in place of charisma, or I say it's synonymous, is they are approachable. Now, let's go over to the other end. Let's go to gravitas, right? So someone who has a style that has a lot of gravitas, and I'm going to use that because a deeper voice, by the way, is also one of the things you can use to show gravitas versus a higher voice, right? All right, is that someone with gravitas commands respect, not necessarily in a very like chop way, although some do. But the best versions of it, I would say, is that they show very high level of competence. People feel they can trust their competence very well. These people's behavior under stress is very calm, very collected, right? It again makes people feel, okay, this person's got my back here, and they can have a directive approach, a little more directive to inspire action. And I tend to call this the authoritative style. So charisma is like the approachable, more approachable, and gravitas is the where it's a little bit more authoritative. And again, it's a continuum, which we'll talk about more. So let's pause for a minute, and I'd love for you to share in chat, just off the top of your head, what do you think your natural tendency is? Where are you? And maybe you're right in the middle. If you could just pop that in there. And then Michael, if you could read off a few of the comments, that would be wonderful. So you see there's a picture of a woman. Her name is Indra Nui, and she is the former chair and CEO of PepsiCo. And the reason that I decided to have that photo there of her is because she is a leader, in fact, that has both the charisma and the gravitas. She's really a good balance. She did need to work on learning when to use one or the other. She's a very powerful woman with a lot of gravitas, commands respect. She's also a person, if you read about her and learn about her leadership style, who is very well known for really inviting and having these two-way engagement with her teams, with the employees of her organization. And that, I would argue, is probably what has gotten her the many years of success.
Thank you for sharing that, Marie-Jeanne. We have some interesting comments in the chat. We have Carl on our team who said she's leaning more on the charismatic side, and Sarah also reflecting, saying she'd be more on that end of the continuum. And we have Stephanie saying she's more middle of the road, and Dion also saying in the middle. We have Jeff saying he leans a little bit more towards approachable, and Ian saying something similar. We have Valerie saying more definitely more gravitas, so recognizing that part of the spectrum. Then we have Susan, really interesting. She's reflecting. She said, I've been told I am too direct, so I guess I come across as authority. So she's
Mm.
using kind of stakeholders to assess how she's showing up in her leadership. And we have George saying authority, but growing to be a mixture. So I hear that he's working on that movement to having both in the same. And Antoinette saying charisma and sometimes gravitas. Sounds interesting. I would make me curious. So, under what conditions might the Antoinette feel that gravitas is coming through? Hazel saying on the charisma side, naturally, sometimes gravitas, depending on the audience. So she's saying it's contextual, maybe depending on when she feels like she needs to show up differently. Tanya saying um, very much charisma with the side of gravitas. Kind of makes me think of, this on the side, French fries on the side, gravitas when necessary. Uh, Kurtu saying, Kurtu, great to have you join us. Kurtu saying gravitas naturally, working on expanding the charisma. So that's kind of what we look to see in coaching clients, right? As a growth mindset. I'm moving towards having more of this. And Maya saying more of a C than a G. Uh, Dawn saying it depends on the situation and who I'm around. And Renee saying more of a C. That's what we have. And lots of people weighing in the chat, Marie-Jeanne.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for all of you sharing. I think it's great for us to see how other leaders also feel, right? That we are all in many different positions on that continuum. And here's the beautiful thing about executive presence is that you don't need to be born with it, right? And I think some people think, oh, I just either have it or, and I don't, I'm not going to be able to change that or get that more gravitas or more approachability. Actually, you can. It's a learnable skill, right? And we are going to get into talking about some of that, how you can learn that today. At this point, you might be thinking, all right, I've got this. She explained to me charisma, gravitas, approachability, authority. You might also be thinking, well, I've been pretty successful in my career with the style that I have. And if I try to change it now, I'm not sure it's going to come across as authentic. I don't want to be phony. It's just not the person I am. And I fully respect that. And I think it's a really important for us to explore that further. Let me share with you my position on the topic of authenticity. So many of you have possibly seen that movie Spider-Man, right? And in that movie, there's a well-known phrase that says, with great power comes great responsibility. I believe the same applies to executive presence. Your responsibility as a leader is to show up for your team how your team needs you to show up, rather than how you feel most comfortable showing up. And you don't need to do a radical makeover. Okay, that's not what I'm advocating here. I am saying, hey, know your strengths, right? We all came into this world with certain strengths that we have, in fact, gotten us to where we are now. Right? What I'm asking you to do is to now learn to expand your range. Learn some new skills and then know, okay, what style am I going to use? What am I going to lean into at a certain point? And when am I going to need to do that, right? So it's both knowing the what and the when. And as you can see by this diagram on the slide here, it's really a full circle in a way, because if you do that, right, you will in fact end up having more power. when you're in your authentic power and ability to influence. So as you move and learn to expand your range, it's very normal to experience some discomfort, right? Any kind of change, trying something new. And there are 3 different ways that I'd like to share with you about how you could help minimize the discomfort, right? Or what I would say is actually to be with the discomfort, just to learn to be with it. Because sometimes it doesn't go away, it's just there, right? But we're not so engaged with it, fighting it, worried about it. So the very first thing is to know your values. As a leader, if you're very grounded and you know, hey, these are the most important values for me. When you have difficult times, when you have to do something that puts you in a place of discomfort, knowing what your value is will really help motivate you towards taking that action. Secondly, I'd invite you to act the part. So rather than worry about whether you're being authentic or not, try to see yourself through the eyes of the other person. So you might not feel like a big shot, you know, but the people around you do see you that way often, right? And so see yourself through their eyes, act the part. And then the third thing that I would recommend is to shift your focus away from the inside stuff that's always going on in our heads, all the stories, and instead start thinking about your team. How can I take care of my team? That's my job. That's my responsibility that comes with my power, right? How can I make sure they feel secure in my leadership? Am I showing up in a way that says, look, I've got this. I'm the expert in the room. I'm the person who's leading this charge. That then empowers them to relax into what they need to do and to step up to what you're asking them to do. All right, there are 3 basic skill sets that fall under this broad topic of executive presence. These are the 3 areas that you want to be evaluating yourself, understanding yourself better. Now, the first one is communication. And this would be communication. It could be written and it could be spoken communication. The second area has to do with your movement and your behaviors. So gestures, physical positioning, and behaviors that tie to that. And then the third one has to do with appearance. So why appearance? And I know that we might want to say, oh, look, it doesn't really matter how I look. I'm authentic. You know, I'm just going to be the way I am. Well, the reality is that a lot of research has shown that within as short a time as 10 seconds, another person is making an evaluation about you on some level, and they do that through the visual first. So we're, as a human species, we're visual species, and that's just how we're wired, right? So that's the science behind it. And the thing is to just understand that while I acknowledge, and we all acknowledge, that appearance is not the only thing, it is something that you still need to pay attention to. Now, when you look at all 3 of these areas, one thing I want to really acknowledge is that they must be culturally relevant and contextually relevant, right? So I'm going to be talking primarily about specific ways of doing these skills in North America. But if you're in other parts of the world, if you're even in different parts of North America still, it could change, you know, how you dress, right? How you speak, how much eye contact there would be. These things are all relative, and it's very important to pay attention to them. Let me give you an example of someone that I was coaching. And so this is a woman who is North American. She's Caucasian, lives in Washington, D.C., working for one of the largest Japanese automakers. And she's being asked to present on stage with the Japanese global CEO. Now, a lot of import for this tied to this invitation, because there has never been a woman of any background, Japanese or not, on stage with the global CEO. So this is a big first. She wanted to really represent, not only for herself, not only for her company, but also for the women in her organization, both in Japan and in the US. And she had been primarily used to, she's a native English speaker, but she was used to kind of presenting more in governmental or formal settings and often behind a podium. We were preparing them to present at CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, the largest in the world, and that's held in Vegas. So I'm sure you're already starting to, oh, there's a difference between DC and Vegas, right? And now we've got Japan and the US, we've got male, we've got female, we've got a lot of variables here. So what I worked on with her, just a couple examples, is one, what was she actually, besides how she speaks coming out from behind a podium, right? And how to use her body to communicate on a larger stage in a very different environment. We also did look at what was she wearing, because what she wore in DC was much more conservative. And what she was going to wear in Vegas is, you think of it like Steve Jobs. If you remember, he always wore turtlenecks. It's kind of like that. Maybe nice slacks, turtlenecks, tennis shoes are good, right? For the CEOs of the biggest companies. So we needed to adjust how she was going to dress. And this was a kind of a little thing, but you got to think about these things, right? Normally she wears heels, and she's already a tall woman. Well, the global CEO of this company was significantly shorter than her. So we were like, ixnay on the heels. Like, we can't have, right? So we shifted to tennis shoes, very nice, stylish tennis shoes, which is acceptable there. So this is just an example here of how you can and how you should think about cultural context, who's the audience, what country are you in, what's the environment, all of these come into play. What makes a leader more approachable? So if you want to be more approachable, and you naturally come across that way, you are usually pretty good at being concise and convincing and clear in the way you talk. That always helps. What is additionally really important is that you're really good at listening, right? And you invite others. You want to hear what they have to say versus steamrolling over them. And in terms of your movement and behaviors, you want to take up maybe a little bit of, let's say, you're not going to be big in the room, right? You're going to allow for space for others this is your body movements, right? How you're sitting, etc. You want to be, again, your gestures should align with your goals of being inviting, right? So open hand gestures. And you want to use expression in your face so people can read, welcoming. Now, a quick example here, steamroller. So I was coaching a leader and in a technical field, and at a pretty high level now, was being asked to scale this department very fast. Now, brilliant person, being asked to step up because they knew that this person knew how to technically take this next place. But what do you need? You need humans, the people on your team. You've got to keep them engaged. You have to keep them motivated. This is during a time in the market when a lot of recruiters, the market was very hot and they were just trying to take away these engineers all the time, right? So how do you keep them engaged? How do you keep them motivated when you're asking them we needed to do this fast and we need you to jump higher and the bar is higher, right? Well, this guy's name was Steamroller because he was just, he used to just direct people, and that was no longer working. So he was committed, and the organization was committed to say, all right, he needs some support. Let's get him to be able to understand how to work with his team differently. So what we did here is, what I encouraged him, amongst a number of things, was to think about what is the emotional state of the people you're going to speak with, this group. What are their concerns? What are they worried about? Right? You have to understand that when you're going in and acknowledge it. And then secondly, what is the end emotional state you want them to leave in, right? So think about those as your guide, your guiding light as to how now, what kind of behaviors, what kind of messaging is going to work. And I worked with him a lot on one, starting to get him to really break it down for folks, because he just doesn't think that way. He thinks in terms of, data points and chips and stuff like that, right? Software. And then what are the behaviors that he could use? What's the language he could use? Next, please. So if you want to show up, or if you already do show up with a more authoritative style, again, clear, concise, right? Very important. Versus, this is something that I do see with people who are very competent, super high skill. They can be even in the C-suite. I see this often. They get too detailed. They get super technical and also rambling. Rambling is really, they're just going on and on. So you want to be concise. An authoritative person will be concise and very clear. And they're going to use the power of the pause. You notice even I pulled it out and gave it some space there on that slide. When you pause, slow down, people are waiting to hear what you're going to say next. That gives you a level of authority because people are curious what's coming next. And also the person, they're like, this person is not nervous. They're not worried. They don't have to just constantly fill the space. So that's if there's something you take away today, power of the pause, amongst some other things we're going to do, of course. In terms of your behavior, again, you are going to take up space, but maybe in a different way here. You can see this person is, this picture here. All right, this person is communicating, I am solid like a rock, right? You're not going to push me. This is my position. You've probably also noticed in some meetings you're in where someone who's very confident or has a position of authority or is wanting to communicate that will kind of spread out. They're going to take their arm, they're going to put it over the back of their chair. Maybe they're going to lean back a little bit like this. Now, you might not see this most formal of meetings, but start noticing it. These people are communicating, I am very comfortable with myself, and I'm so comfortable that I can just, I can just lean back. A person going back again to the standing like this, right, is that not only this communicates strength, but actually being able to stand like this with your arms down by your side and open also communicates significant amount of confidence. It really means that I'm not worried about anybody coming at me, so to speak, right? Or taking my authority. That's how confident I am. I don't have to do this or this. This shows a lack, shows the opposite. Let's say people are fidgeting, covering themselves, crossing their legs when they're standing. You might see people doing that. I think we've covered there pretty well the authority skills. So let's go to the next one if we could. Thank you. These are some ways I want to share with you about how not to leak your power. So we're going to dive a little bit more here into language under the communication skill set, right? And then also some behaviors that you can do. So language. You probably notice people who apologize all the time. Not a good move. That leaks your power. If you're finding or hearing people say, I just want to say, that's a leaking of power. It's like kind of negating it. It's like, I just want to. Just say it. Say whatever you want to say. People, you'll notice, say, I think, versus I expect, I propose, I recommend. Those are much more powerful because we know you're thinking. Using a verb that's much more commanding, in a sense, more authoritative. And then the last one you might notice people say is at the end of whatever they're communicating, they'll say, does that make sense? Well, that to me often communicates like, you're not sure it makes sense. And so you're asking to others, does it make sense? Right? Instead, you could say, any other questions I'm happy to address. that communicates much more authority. And if they have something they don't think is clear, they can let you know, but you're not doubting it at all. Now, let's talk a little bit about this other area, which is the, you see, I'm talking about being silent or unseen. If you're in meetings, or even within the whole organization as you have interactions, if you're don't speak up enough, you don't want to, obviously you don't want to dominate all the time, but you do need to speak up in a meeting at certain times. If you're not sharing what your goals and your accomplishments are in a meeting, one-on-one with people, right? People will not know what you're doing, right? And there's a saying that some people will say, well, I just thought my work will speak for itself. I have found over and over again, this is not the case. You do need to communicate what it is you have done, not in a bragging way, but this is what I've accomplished, right? In order to best serve your team, move everyone along, including yourself. And when you're in a meeting, also, there are some certain ways to not allow others to take credit. And that's something I'm sure many of you may have experienced or seen others have that happen to them. And we will be doing a particular exercise that I'm going to teach you that can help with that. Now, if you are too solo, and by solo, I mean you're just not developing networks of supporters, allies, and what I call almost like a personal board. You need to have people in the organization that know what you're doing, that are speaking for you, that are promoting you. So that's another very important way to make sure that having that will make sure that you don't leak power. And I wanted to make a comment here is that I see these characteristics, these ways of leaking power, I see them in men and women. Absolutely. It's not just one or the other. I mean, maybe certain areas I'll see more often with women or certain areas with men. But believe me, I get many men who come to me with the same things that I have women and vice versa. So how do you know how you're showing up? Right? And there are several ways to do this. You can get feedback from your organization. Of course, you're going to have had a performance review. Perhaps you've had some personality assessments. Those are helpful. Another area is, and this I find extremely helpful, is to get feedback from your key stakeholders. Now, sometimes an organization will have it in a written survey form. Somewhat limiting, I find. It's helpful information, especially if I'm a coach and I'm coming in. But what I find most helpful is if I'm able to, with you as the leader, strategically pick some key stakeholders and I then go to them, of course, with the approval of you and your manager and others, and really talk to them to understand, okay, how is this person perceived? Because this is super important to talk about. You might think you come across as a certain way, but to be honest, sad but true, it's not how you think you come across, it's how others perceive you as coming across that really matters. So when I go and talk and do these stakeholder interviews, and I'm able to leverage years of having been a journalist and just kind of talking one-on-one can get me much more nuanced, by the way. And of course, it can be completely confidential. We make an agreement on that, but I'm still able to take things away that influence the coaching. For example, I talk to them about their brand. And you may know my colleague, Sarah. She did the most recent, webinar. She did it on the topic of personal brand, right? So I will ask, what are some words that describe this person's brand? I will say, don't hold back. Tell me, it can be a word that's viewed as positive or negative. Either one's fine. What is this person's communication style? And I'll get them to give me examples. Because if someone just says, well, it's kind of like this, you're like, okay, but what is the behavior I'm doing, right? So you need to get into that level of detail. And that's where I find it really is helpful when I can do that with a leader. And there are a number of other things that I would be asking about. The other thing I think is important too is that then work together on getting you to figure out, how do I get ongoing feedback from these stakeholders? Right? You don't want to wait 6 months or a year and then go check with them. You need to be getting feedback all the time, right? So those are some of the things that I'll work with them on. And I think those really help significantly. The last thing I'd add is don't try to bite off too much. In a 6-month period, I think it's realistic to try to change 3 behaviors, have 3 goals that you're working on all the time and that you're bringing to the attention of your key stakeholders so that they see you're working on them, right? Because that also moves the needle on perception. All right, next slide, please. So now let's just review some key takeaways from today. Executive presence, in its essence, is your ability to demonstrate power. With that power comes the responsibility. And the wonderful thing is that you can learn. Responsibility includes learning, and executive presence skills are learnable. The second thing I'd like to call out is that executive presence is situational. As a leader, another one of your learnings will be, when do I command more respect? When do I show up as more more authoritative? And when do I index a little bit the other way, right? Being more approachable. That's going to be another skill you're going to work on and want to be very aware of. That's your range, being able to access that range. And thirdly, you really can come across as authentic and confident. And you can do that by focusing on your team more so than on yourself, and by really learning these particular skills, right? Practice the skills. So at this point, I would like to introduce to you a specific framework called PrEP. And this is what we're going to be using in the open coaching. So I'm going to do a quick review of it. And then after that, I think Michael's going to help us try to get some volunteers together, and we're going to dive into the coaching. All right. So PrEP, P-R-E-P. It's a framework that I found is helpful for so many people. Each of the letters stand for, as you can see there, point, reason, an example, and then a point. Notice that point is at the beginning, at the end, so we're kind of bookending it, and there's an important reason for that. One of the things, the value that you're going to get out of this is, in addition to helping you become much more concise with what you want to say in a meeting, whether it's one-on-one or in a group, is that it also helps your idea not get stolen by someone else or someone else taking credit for it. And that's because you'll notice here, as I take you through this, you're going to make the point at the beginning, and you're going to make the last thing you say the same point. Right? Even if you get interrupted, you're going to come back, and then you're going to repeat that point. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's see, the point. Well, actually, before I give you the example, let me just talk about. So the point is, you're going to say, this is I recommend X, right? And then you're going to say, my reason is because, say whatever it is. For example, give a short example, and then you're going to say, so I recommend X. Now, let me just give you a quick example that actually doesn't have to do with the workplace, but, well, maybe it does. Farming business, all right? So I'm in a meeting with the other owners of this farm, and I say to them, my recommendation is that we plant this year tomatoes in a quarter of our agricultural land, because we did not last year meet our revenue goals by planting the zucchini. For example, I've shown this to you before, the zucchini really was withering, and all of our tests were showing that the soil was not compatible. Research shows that it is compatible for tomatoes. So my recommendation is we plant tomatoes in a fourth of our agricultural land this year. All right, so it's really simple. Recommendation at the beginning, recommendation at the end. The second thing is the because, and the example, you got to be careful on all of these. You want to keep them concise. What I'm going to be inviting you to do is to bring an example, volunteer and think about something that either you were in a meeting and you felt like, oh man, I really flubbed. Like I was all over the place. And I think someone either took my idea or it wasn't clear and concise. I felt I was rambling. Okay. And it could be also something coming up that you're thinking about and you're worried that that might be the case. So you want to show up as more convincing and authoritative and that they know it's your idea. So Michael, at this point, good to
Yeah,
hand
thank
off.
you so much for sharing that content. We have time for just one volunteer. And so for that volunteer, we'd like you to have a past meeting or upcoming meeting where you have a goal that's concise, like the example that Marie-Jeanne gave, and you're open to engaging in a meaningful coaching conversation, that you're ready to come on camera and microphone, you consent to be recorded, and we could share that online, and then you're using a desktop or a laptop computer just to ease for the communication. So if you want to volunteer, please just go ahead, let us know in the chat, say I volunteer, or if you know how to use the Zoom control with the React icon, you can click on there and raise your hand. Either way, we'd like you to just let us know if you'd like to volunteer. We'll have the opportunity to do just one quick coaching session, and then we'll wrap up our webinar. So who would like to volunteer? Please let us know in the chat or raise your hand.
All right. Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for volunteering. So tell me as concisely as you can, but also just however best you can, what's the situation and what it is you want to say, and maybe even take a stab at it if you want right off the bat.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to, speak with you and have an open coaching session. I don't know that I have it fully formed, but nobody jumped in, so I thought I'd take the opportunity. I've worked in human resources for various corporations for going on 20 years now. I'm finally at the point where I'm dabbling on the side, venturing out on my own, and I have my first client coming up where I'm going to be facilitating a leadership workshop and incorporating an assessment into it, one that I've used before. And I have done training internally with the companies that I've worked for. I'm comfortable with those things. I would say I'm naturally an ambivert and I lean towards the introvert side, but I'm very much comfortable presenting in front of people and able to be extroverted where I can. I am, though, a perfectionist, and I expect that I am a subject matter expert on everything. I expect for things to be perfect. I'm very hard on myself. I'm a typical perfectionist. Okay. So while I'm very comfortable doing these things internally with my company, I do have some nerves with doing this for the first time with an external client. Again, it's my first one that I'm doing, not with an organization that I work directly for. So I've got a little bit of nerves going into that.
Understandable. What would be the conversation that you are concerned about, and what would be the point? What's your main point? You want to make a recommendation or position?
Maybe it's accepting in some way that it doesn't have to be perfect, that I don't have to know the answer to every single question that might come up, that it's okay to not know, and work around those things. I don't know what question might come up that I don't know the answer to. It's
Yes.
a
Sarah, let
fear of
me
the
interrupt.
unknown.
One second. I wanted to make so I'm hearing here that this might not be so much a conversation that you're having with them, making a point, but maybe it's almost with you.
Yes,
Oh,
exactly.
beautiful.
It
That's
mostly
a
is
great
with,
opportunity. Okay.
I think it's absolutely with me because when I do these things with my company or, the various
Yeah.
um, trainings and town halls and things like that, I always get very positive feedback about how I deliver, how I come across, the content that I cover. I think it's more of an internal battle, that imposter syndrome or struggling with perfectionism. So I think it is an internal conversation.
All right. Beautiful. So first thing, one of the things that we talked about is remember you're doing this in the service of others, right?
Yes.
So it does not need to be perfect, right? Because they are already viewing you as the expert. They know you're the expert. It's amazing how others view, we have our own stories. So
Right.
let's say you're talking to yourself. So I heard you say at the beginning, I don't have to be perfect, something like that. You could, is that comfortable? Is that like the core, the gist of it?
Yes,
All right.
absolutely.
I
Yeah,
don't have to be perfect because, don't think about it too much. Just what? Because,
I don't have to be perfect because nobody's perfect. Nobody knows everything. And as long as I can add value to the people that I'm serving, I think that's really what matters.
okay.
I
Let's
guess.
add maybe, I'd encourage you maybe to add one other thing. No one is perfect. What we were just talking about is I know a lot. I am a subject matter expert. And what I don't know, I can always come back to, right? So you could say,
Yeah.
I don't have to have the perfect answer at every moment because I already know and they know that I am the subject matter expert. This is my specialty. I have done this for years. Right? Or you could just not have done this for years, but my subject matter expert. And then you could say, for example, there's probably examples you could use, right? I've think about times when you on the spot were able to. I'm sure there's so many. And not only on the spot, what about you just say, on that one, I'm going to get back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have done that. That's the thing. Like I've done that here. I'm very comfortable. I can answer things on the fly, or I can say, we'll circle back on that, or maybe that's a whole nother conversation and it's not something that we can delve into, based on the topic that we're
Perfect.
covering. So again, I do those things internally. I don't know, why it even worries me at all with regard to this upcoming workshop that I'm doing. It's just something that I have thought about. And when it pops in my mind, I try not to give it too much of my time because I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I try to switch my mindset, remind myself that it's going to be fine because it always has been fine. I've never done a bad job with these things, so why would I
There
change
we go.
now simply?
It always has been fine. I've never
Yes.
done a bad job. Could you write those down? It always, like, write it down. It always has been fine. I've never done a bad job. Right? Those are examples.
Mhm.
And then I'm going to add one last thing. It's not exactly tied to prep, but it's a little bit more of the inner game, as I call it. The stuff that's going on here is those voices that are telling you, I've got to do it right. I've got to do, those are really wonderful, helpful voices. They have gotten you to where you are. They have made you as professional, as outstanding as you are. And sometimes they need to go on a little vacation because they're just there to help you, but they're dominating. So sometimes I'll invite people to just even play, like create these characters that just say, you need to go on vacation. And then you go back to your statements. What did you just say to me? What did we just write down? You
We
wrote down.
wrote down, it has been fine. I've I've always been fine,
There you go.
or it's always been fine.
It's always been fine. So, yeah. So going back to, I don't have to be perfect. Right? I know my work. I'm a top expert at this. It's always been fine. You might pick one example that helps you feel really strong about it, where you've done
Mhm.
that. And then you can say, and then the last thing you can say to yourself is, I don't have to be perfect. In fact, you could say, I am perfect. I am perfect just the way I am, right? It's almost like channeling it. Like you have so much knowledge back here that you just, whew. Michael, I'm thinking we might be at time.
Yes, I want to
Okay.
thank you both so much for Sarah for stepping forward, Marie-Jeanne for your presentation. Next slide, please. So this has been our webinar on executive presence, and we're going to wrap it up now. So you'll be getting in a few minutes a follow-up email that has a link to our executive presence playbook, our slide deck, and a complimentary coaching session you just saw Marie-Jeanne do. We invite you to do the same. If you'd like some help from us, Maya and I will be happy to meet with you separately, or you can reach out to us and we can talk with you about the services we have to provide. Next slide, please. And we welcome your feedback. As soon as we wrap up this session, you'll get a survey to give us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you, make changes based on what we hear. Next slide. And we might want to make you aware of our next coaching session, which will be on Friday, May 2nd at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That'll be Calm in the Chaos, Positive Intelligence for Mental Well-Being. We hope you join us for that webinar. Next slide. And as I mentioned, we are always here for you. Next, you can reach out to us at this telephone number. You can contact me directly at that email address, or you can learn more about our services on our website. So again, I want to thank Marie-Jeanne. Thank you so much for presenting. Thank you very much for our team, Carl and Maya, for helping us get to the point. And a big thank you to all of you that joined us and to Sarah, who stepped forward to volunteer. We appreciate you all joining us today. We hope to hear from you again at a future webinar or one-on-one or coaching or any service that we can provide. We are here for you. Thank you again very much. Enjoy the rest of the day and your weekend. Take care.